Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Extended School Year Basics webinar with the DC Special Education Cooperative. Just really briefly, this webinar, the main purpose is to get member schools thinking well in advance about how you can plan out ESY for the coming extended school year. So these are all just going to be some basics. And if you have any particular questions, there'll be time at the end of the webinar for questions. And if I can answer them, I will. If I need to direct you to someone who can better answer your questions, I will do that as well. I think essentially you have to start with a really good understanding of what ESY is. So what it is a federal mandate. And the federal law describes ESY as essential to the provision of FAPE for some students. So the idea is that not every student with special needs needs extended school year services. According to OSSE, ESY services are special education related services that are provided to a student with an IEP when determined appropriate by the IEP team. And this is something that is done beyond the LEA's regularly scheduled school year. So how do you determine? I'm guessing many, if not all of you, have seen these three questions. The answer to all three of these questions should be yes in order for a student to qualify for services. So, will one or more of the student's critical skills be jeopardized by a break in service? Is there a likelihood of significant regression of one of the critical skills that have been identified? And can the student recoup any regression with reteaching in a reasonable amount of time? So in order to answer those three questions, you need to have data to support the answers that you come up with. So the same data that you use to progress monitor and make all other decisions throughout the school year, this is the same data you use to make decisions about students qualifying for ESY. You're looking at classwork, you're looking at tests, you're looking at quizzes, anecdotal records, informal assessment data, formal assessment data, etc. What you really want to pay close attention to is how the student performs in general after an extended break from school. You know, previous summers, winter breaks, those breaks that are generally a long time. How do these students fare once they return to school? And are they usually okay with just the normal activities that you could do to catch up? Or does it significantly impact their ability to recoup the skills and move forward to learn new skills? So once we use data to answer all of those questions, then I think it's important to actually consider, when we decide. I think the key thing that I find really important for LEAs to do is to make sure that the ESY decisions are being made at every single annual review that happens during the school year. This helps you to avoid the mad rush that can happen in March and April when you're trying to meet certification deadlines for May. The reality is you generally have more than enough data on returning students to make decisions at the annual meeting. So there's no need to wait until spring to decide if a student should attend ESY. Those crunch time decisions really only need to be made for new students who, one, you didn't have a decision made prior to arriving at your LEA, or it didn't come with enough information for you to make that decision prior to spring. So hopefully that's very few students, maybe a handful of students. And I say a handful in comparison to the rest of your population. So where do ESY services happen? This is often a question that gets asked. And I think the key thing to remember is that you should always, always, always plan to provide services at your LEA first. So you need to come up with as many ways possible, try all alternatives, all sort of ideas, and work through how you can provide those services at your school. If staffing and resources are really, truly a significant issue, then you need to consider partnerships with other LEAs as a last resort. So, working together with another LEA who might only have a few students, and you have a few students, and maybe another LEA has a few students, where you guys can work together to create sort of an ESY program. And depending on the individual hours required, sometimes services could just be happening at a student's home. If a student only needs, 1 or 2 hours a week of a particular service, and they're going to be in summer camp, then you can send service providers and specialized instructors to their actual locations, as long as the team agrees that they can happen, as long as the school coordinates and make sure it's coordinated and parents are in agreement. How do ESY services happen? They must be individualized. So when you're creating an ESY program, what is in mind first is the individual needs of each student in terms of what is required on their IEP. When we're providing services, we are providing specialized instruction and related services. So those people providing those services should be certified or designated specialized instructors or related service providers. One key thing to remember is that ESY is not summer school. So what that means is that simply sending kids to whatever your summer school program structure is not significant enough to be called extended school year service. Services can happen in the summer school program, but just sending them to summer school is not sufficient without provision of necessary specialized instruction related service hours. So as I've highlighted before, we need to make sure that it is special education teachers and related service providers who are providing services in the extended school year format. A lot of times the question goes around, well, how much service, do you provide in extended school year? You provide whatever the team decides the student needed, so that they can maintain any progress made during the regular school year. So, and it's really important to remember too, that ESY is not, the focus is not on providing enrichment or additional resources or maximizing their program beyond FAPE. Okay, so there's no magic formula. Some kids need, I've organized ESY programs where some kids only needed 1 hour a week of a particular type of instruction. Some kids needed 5 hours a day. But you have to schedule, you have to create your program specifically based on which individual student needs. According to OSSE, I have just a tidbit down here. The scheduled delivery of services must be consistent to the specification in the student's IEP. There can be schedule changes, some exceptions with schedule changes, that can be made up later, for example, if delivery of a previously missed service session. But if there are any major changes to ESY service delivery, they need to be documented through the IEP amendment process. So what OSSE likes to have all the LEAs do is to certify. And so these are just a couple of good FAQs from OSSE that I think are helpful. And I just sort of posted them here for people to see in a condensed area. Why OSSE certifies? It's OSSE's way of making sure that LEAs are aware that ESY decisions have to be made and that schools are participating in ESY decisions as needed. And also they are monitoring to make sure that if you have students in non-public programs who require extended school year services, that you're making those decisions and providing those services for them as well. What the certification process also does is produces student data so that OSSE can make decisions about expenses and can maybe anticipate what the cost of ESY services will be for that particular school year, and that includes transportation. Sometimes the question comes up of if you are an LEA and you don't have any students in need of non-public ESY services or summer ESY related transportation services, should you still certify? Absolutely. An LEA without any students in need of summer non-public ESY services or summer ESY services should submit certification confirming that there are no students in need. And just a reminder that they usually expect this to be no later than the first Monday of May every year. So here are a few resources from OSSE that should be, I think, are very helpful. The first here is just some frequently asked questions from which I pulled the first two, or the last two questions. And then if you want to see the policy on certification and ESY, you can click this link here at the bottom as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email Julie Camarada, who is the director of the DC Special Education Cooperative. And she can forward your questions to me. I'm Megan Alderton. And, always remember you can use the listserv as questions come up, and you'll get your questions answered there. And if we can answer them, we will. If we need to refer you to someone else who can, then we will do that. Really appreciate you guys listening in on the webinar. I hope that everyone has gotten a good start as we are in approaching spring, which is usually a pretty busy time for our schools. Wish you good luck, and the co-op is here if you need them. So with that said, thanks for joining, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you later.